You leave the gathering. Nothing went wrong. No conflict. No awkward silence. No obvious tension. People were kind. The conversation flowed. You even laughed. And yet, the moment you close the door behind you, your body drops. Your shoulders sink. Your breathing changes. You feel an immediate need for silence. Not sadness. Not loneliness. Just exhaustion. You sit down and stare at nothing for a few minutes. And a thought creeps in. Why am I so drained? You start questioning yourself. Am I becoming antisocial? Was I pretending to enjoy it? Why can other people socialize effortlessly? From the outside, nothing dramatic happened. But internally, something was working the entire time. Your nervous system. Social interaction is not just talking. It's regulation. It's reading tone, monitoring facial expressions, adjusting your own reactions, filtering your words, calibrating your energy. Even when you're not consciously aware of it, your system is scanning. Who is dominant? Who is withdrawn? Who needs reassurance? Who might misunderstand me? And while you're doing all of that, you're also managing your persona, the version of you that fits the room. Carl Jung described the persona as the social mask we wear to function in society. It isn't fake. It's adaptive, but it consumes energy, especially when it's overextended. Maybe you didn't exaggerate. Maybe you weren't performing dramatically, but you were still adjusting. You softened your opinions. You modulated your tone. You chose which stories to tell. You decided what not to say. That subtle editing process costs energy. You may not notice it in the moment, but your body does. This is why the exhaustion often hits after the interaction. When the stimulation drops, your system recalibrates. And recalibration feels like fatigue. Think about the physical sensations. After social time, do you feel heavy behind the eyes? Slightly irritable for no clear reason? Mentally foggy? Less tolerant of noise? These are not signs of depression. They are signs of overstimulation. Your nervous system has been active, and now it wants recovery. But here's where confusion sets in. You may think this exhaustion means you don't like people, or that you're becoming withdrawn. But ask yourself something more precise. Did you feel lonely in that room, or did you feel activated? There's a difference. Loneliness feels empty. Overstimulation feels full. Too many cues. Too many signals. Too much subtle management. You can enjoy people and still feel drained afterward. Enjoyment and regulation are separate processes. You can have meaningful conversations and still need silence afterward. Silence is not avoidance. It's decompression. The problem is that many people mislabel regulation as weakness. You may compare yourself to someone who can stay out all night, talk endlessly, and seem energized by it. You think, why can't I do that? But not everyone manages energy the same way. And not everyone is at the same stage of individuation. As you become more self-aware, you become less willing to operate unconsciously. Earlier in life, you may have ignored the fatigue. You pushed through, stayed longer, forced engagement. You came home overstimulated, but told yourself it was normal. Now, perhaps you notice it more clearly. You feel the depletion sooner. You leave earlier. You choose fewer gatherings. That shift can feel like withdrawal, but it may actually be discernment. When the persona loosens, when you stop overperforming, your tolerance for unnecessary stimulation decreases. You become more selective, not because you dislike people, but because you value stability. There's another layer here. During social interaction, part of your attention remains outward. You are tracking how you're perceived, not obsessively, but subtly. Are they engaged? Did that land well? Should I clarify? That tracking creates tension, even if the tension is mild. Over hours, mild tension accumulates, and accumulation becomes fatigue. Think about how your body feels during prolonged social time. Is your posture slightly upright? Is your facial expression engaged? Are you holding eye contact consistently? These are small muscular activations. They are sustainable for a while, but they are not neutral. Your nervous system oscillates between stimulation and restraint, excitement and monitoring, expression and filtering. When you finally return to solitude, The monitoring stops, and your system exhales. That exhale can feel like collapse. You might lie down without meaning to, scroll passively, sit in silence. It's not depression. It's discharge. Your system releasing accumulated stimulation. This is especially noticeable if you are in a phase of identity consolidation, when you are integrating shadow material, when you are becoming less reactive, when you are refining your persona. Social environments require more awareness. You notice dynamics you once ignored. Power plays, subtle insecurity, overcompensation, people-pleasing. Earlier, you may have participated unconsciously. Now you observe. Observation consumes energy because you are not just participating, you are regulating. And regulation is metabolically expensive. Carl Jung emphasized that psychological energy is finite. When too much energy is directed outward, the inner world depletes. Individuation requires inward energy. Reflection, integration, stability. If you spend hours outwardly managing impressions, you will feel the cost. This doesn't make you antisocial. It makes you aware. There's also a misconception about introversion. Introversion is not simply being tired after socializing. It's a deeper orientation of energy toward the inner world. But even people who are socially capable and expressive can experience exhaustion, especially if they're no longer operating automatically. As you mature psychologically, you stop absorbing social environments blindly. You become sensitive to incongruence. If someone is performing confidence but feels insecure, you sense it. If someone is masking resentment with politeness, you sense it. That sensing increases cognitive load. You don't have to analyze it consciously. Your body processes it. And processing consumes energy. So you come home tired. Not because you failed socially. Not because you dislike people. But because your system worked. It worked to remain aligned. To not overextend. To not overperform. To not abandon yourself. That work is invisible. No one thanks you for regulating. No one sees the restraint. But your nervous system keeps score. If you ignore the fatigue repeatedly, you may start avoiding social interaction altogether. Not because you hate people, but because your body associates interaction with depletion. This is where awareness matters. Instead of labeling yourself antisocial, ask, how long was I activated? Did I take breaks? Was I authentic or slightly performing? Did I allow myself to be proportionate? These questions shift the narrative. You are not withdrawing. You are recalibrating. And recalibration is growth. It feels quieter, more selective, less dramatic. You may socialize less frequently, but more intentionally. You may leave earlier, but with less resentment. You may speak less, but with more alignment. That is not regression. It is consolidation. Your identity is stabilizing. And stable identity does not need constant stimulation. The exhaustion you feel is not a character flaw. It is feedback. Feedback that your system has limits. Feedback that energy must be restored. Feedback that awareness has a cost. The question is not, why am I so drained? The more accurate question is, how much of my energy was directed outward? Because when you understand that, the fatigue stops feeling mysterious. It starts feeling logical. And once it feels logical, you can respond differently, not by withdrawing completely, but by pacing, by regulating before depletion, by honoring the cost of persona management. Because you are not becoming antisocial. You are becoming conscious. And consciousness requires energy. You don't just feel tired. You feel like you've been on. That's the word most people use when they describe it later. I just feel like I was on the whole time. That phrase reveals everything. Being on means you were not fully resting inside yourself. You were slightly elevated, slightly attentive, slightly filtered, slightly adjusted. Not fake, just managed. The persona is not deception. It is adaptation. But adaptation requires energy. Carl Jung described the persona as the interface between the individual and society. It allows you to function, to cooperate, to communicate, to belong. But when the persona becomes overactive, Exhaustion follows, because you are not only relating, you are monitoring. Think about what happens internally during social interaction. You're listening, but you're also preparing your response. You're speaking, but you're also tracking how it lands. You're laughing, but you're also calibrating intensity. Even subtle things, adjusting posture, maintaining appropriate eye contact, timing your reactions. Each of these requires microregulation. Individually, they are small. Collectively, they are taxing. Earlier in life, you may not have noticed this cost because you were operating automatically. The persona was reflexive. Now, if you are in a stage of psychological consolidation, you are more aware. You notice when you exaggerate. You notice when you overaccommodate. You notice when you're about to overshare. And instead of flowing unconsciously, you regulate consciously. Conscious regulation consumes more energy than unconscious reaction. That is not weakness. That is growth. But growth has metabolic cost. Let's ground this in a familiar scenario. You attend a dinner. The conversation shifts into topics that subtly conflict with your values. Nothing extreme, just mild disagreement. Earlier, you may have conformed automatically, nodded, smiled, changed the subject. Now perhaps you pause. You decide whether to speak honestly or stay neutral. You weigh the cost. You choose a measured response. That internal weighing, even if invisible, requires effort. Multiply that by multiple conversations in one evening. Your nervous system remains slightly activated. Activation is not the same as anxiety. It is alertness. Social spaces require alertness. Who is sensitive? Who is dominating? Who is withdrawing? Even if you're not consciously analyzing, your system scans. Scanning is protective, but it's also stimulating. The body doesn't distinguish between physical exertion and cognitive social exertion in simple terms. Energy is energy. If you hold tension in your face, regulate tone, and maintain engagement for hours, you will feel it later. And here's something subtle. As you individuate, your tolerance for unconscious dynamics decreases. Earlier, you may have participated in gossip easily. Now you feel the friction. Earlier, you may have tolerated competitive undertones. Now they irritate you slightly. Earlier, you may have overextended yourself socially without noticing resentment. Now, you feel depletion sooner. This is not social decline. It is sensitivity to incongruence. You are no longer willing to fragment yourself as easily. And fragmentation is expensive. Every time you act in a way that contradicts your internal truth, your system compensates. That compensation feels like fatigue. For example, if you laugh at something you don't find funny, if you agree outwardly but disagree internally, if you soften your opinion to avoid tension, each instance is small, but each creates micro-friction between inner state and outer behavior. Friction accumulates. Accumulated friction becomes exhaustion. You may notice that when you are with one or two people you feel deeply safe with, you feel less drained. Why? Because persona management decreases. You don't monitor as much. You don't filter as tightly. You don't calibrate every word. Alignment reduces cost. Misalignment increases cost. This is why it's not about introversion alone. You can be socially capable and still exhausted, because exhaustion is often about incongruence, not social preference. Another dynamic is boundary maintenance. If you are learning to stop people-pleasing, social settings require vigilance. You notice when someone subtly pressures you. You notice when you feel tempted to overcommit. You resist. Resistance takes energy. Before, you may have said yes automatically. Now you pause. Pausing is growth, but pausing interrupts autopilot. Autopilot conserves energy. Conscious choice consumes it. This stage can feel paradoxical. You are becoming more grounded, yet more easily drained. But this is often temporary, because you are still practicing conscious regulation. Over time, new responses become integrated. They require less effort. But during transition, awareness amplifies cost. There's also emotional labor involved in social presence. You might find yourself absorbing others' moods, not dramatically, but subtly. If someone is insecure, you sense it. If someone is agitated, you register it. If someone seeks validation, you feel the pull to provide reassurance. Earlier, you may have absorbed and reacted unconsciously. Now, you observe and regulate. Observation without absorption is a skill, and skills require energy while developing. Another layer. If you are in a phase where you no longer derive identity from external reaction, social spaces can feel less stimulating. Earlier, attention energized you. Now, attention feels neutral. Without the adrenaline of validation, the body doesn't get the same spike. So when the event ends, you feel the pure cost without the compensatory high. It feels like net loss. But what you've actually lost is artificial stimulation. And what remains is honest expenditure. The exhaustion feels more noticeable because it is not masked by ego reinforcement. You're no longer fueled by applause. You are operating on alignment. Alignment is steady, not stimulating. Steady energy dips when overused. This is why you might enjoy the evening and still need to sit in silence afterward. Enjoyment does not eliminate activation. It simply coexists with it. There's also cognitive load. Modern social environments are layered. Phones on the table, background noise, multiple conversations, subtle social hierarchies. Your brain processes far more information than you consciously realize. When you are psychologically aware, you process even more. Tone shifts, microexpressions, unspoken tension. That awareness is maturity. But maturity costs energy. The key insight here is this. You are not tired people. You are tired of managing energy. If you spend hours regulating expression, tracking dynamics, and maintaining alignment, fatigue is logical. The questions shift from, what's wrong with me? To, how did I distribute my energy? Did you take breaks? Did you step outside for air? Did you allow moments of quiet? Did you remain authentic or slightly performative? Energy mismanagement feels like personality flaw. Energy awareness feels like responsibility. You may also notice that when you attend fewer but more aligned interactions, exhaustion decreases, not because you became more extroverted, but because fragmentation decreased. As individuation progresses, you become more selective. You prefer depth over volume, fewer conversations, more congruent ones, fewer environments, more aligned ones. This is not isolation. It is refinement. But refinement means you feel misalignment more clearly. And feeling more clearly means you must respect your limits. If you override the signals repeatedly, exhaustion intensifies, not because you are antisocial, but because you are ignoring regulation needs. The body will enforce what the ego denies. If you refuse to pace, you will feel depleted. If you pace intentionally, you feel balanced. This is the structural understanding. Social fatigue is often the cost of persona management combined with conscious regulation, and during individuation, both increase temporarily, not forever, but during consolidation. You are learning to exist socially without abandoning yourself. That is advanced work, and advanced work requires recovery. The goal is not to withdraw from society. The goal is to interact without fragmentation. And fragmentation decreases only when awareness increases. Awareness increases cost initially, but long-term, it reduces internal conflict. So, the fatigue you feel is not regression. It is recalibration. Your system is learning new ways of engaging. And until those ways become natural, energy will fluctuate. The important shift is this. Stop interpreting exhaustion as personality failure. Start interpreting it as energy data. Because once you treat it as data, you can respond wisely. And wise response prevents chronic depletion. You are not becoming antisocial. You are becoming deliberate. The solution is not to avoid people. It's to stop abandoning yourself while you're with them. There's a difference. When you feel drained after social interaction, the instinct can swing to extremes. Either you force yourself to socialize more to fix it, or you start canceling everything and retreating completely. Neither addresses the real issue, because the issue is not social contact. It's energy regulation. If persona management and nervous system activation are what exhausts you, then the shift must happen there, not in isolation. Start by observing your activation in real time. During a gathering, notice your body. Is your jaw slightly tight? Are your shoulders raised? Is your breathing shallow? Most people don't realize they are physically bracing while socializing, not because they are anxious, but because they are subtly performing, holding posture, maintaining expression, sustaining attentiveness. Try this instead. Lower your shoulders consciously. Let your face relax between expressions. Take one slow breath while someone else is speaking. These small adjustments reduce accumulated tension. You don't need to disengage. You need to stop overholding. Second, reduce unnecessary persona inflation. You do not need to be the most interesting person in the room. You do not need to respond to every comment. You do not need to fill silence. If you are in a stage of individuation, part of your exhaustion may come from habitually amplifying yourself. When you stop amplifying, energy stabilizes. Speak when you have something aligned to say. Let others carry parts of the conversation. Allow silence without rushing to repair it. You'll notice something subtle. The room continues without you overextending, and your energy remains steadier. Third, pace exposure intentionally. Long, unbroken social engagement is more draining than space interaction. Step outside for 2 minutes. Go to the restroom and breathe slowly. Sit quietly in your car before driving home. These are not signs of weakness. They are regulation practices. Your nervous system needs transition time, especially if you are sensitive to social cues. Another important shift is honesty about capacity. Earlier, you may have accepted every invitation out of obligation. Now, select intentionally, not from avoidance, from clarity. If you attend fewer gatherings but show up more regulated, you reduce depletion. Quality over volume applies to social energy as well. There's also an internal boundary that matters. You do not need to manage everyone's emotional state. If someone is insecure, you do not need to reassure excessively. If someone dominates the conversation, you do not need to compete. If tension arises, you do not need to resolve it instantly. Release the responsibility of emotional overfunctioning. That alone reduces fatigue significantly. Overfunctioning feels generous, but it is draining. Individuation involves allowing others to carry their own emotional weight. You carry yours. They carry theirs. This reduces energetic leakage. Another practical distinction. Isolation feels heavy and avoidant. Regulation feels intentional and calm. After a gathering, if you choose quiet and feel relief, that's regulation. If you withdraw and feel bitterness or fear, that may be avoidance. Learn the difference internally. Ask yourself after social time, do I feel resentful? Or do I simply need silence? Resentment signals misalignment. Silence signals decompression. When you respond to decompression intentionally, exhaustion becomes manageable. You might schedule solitude after events. You might protect the next morning for quiet. You might limit back-to-back engagements. These are structural adjustments, not personality changes. There's also a deeper integration happening. As you mature psychologically, you rely less on external stimulation. Earlier, social intensity may have energized you. Attention, validation, momentum. Now, that stimulation feels less necessary. Without the adrenaline spike of ego reinforcement, you feel the true cost of interaction more clearly. This is not decline. It is stabilization. You are not fueled by reaction. You are fueled by alignment. Alignment conserves energy long-term, but during transition, it reveals where energy is leaking. If you consistently leave environments feeling drained, examine alignment. Were you authentic or slightly performing? Did you overtalk or overhold? Did you stay longer than you wanted? Small corrections prevent chronic exhaustion. The goal is not to become socially minimal. It is to become socially proportionate. Proportion means your internal state and external expression match more closely. When they match, fragmentation decreases. When fragmentation decreases, fatigue reduces. You also begin noticing something encouraging. When you remain regulated, your recovery time shortens. Earlier, you may have needed an entire day to recover. Now, Perhaps you need an hour or 30 minutes. That improvement signals nervous system adaptation. The more you practice social presence without overextension, the less costly it becomes. Integration reduces strain. You are training your system to engage without self-abandonment, and that training takes repetition. There will still be days you overdo it, days you stay too long, days you overcommit. Notice it. Adjust next time. No self-criticism required, just refinement. The fatigue you feel is not a flaw. It is feedback. Feedback that you are more aware. Feedback that you are sensitive to incongruence. Feedback that your energy is finite. Respecting that finiteness is maturity. You are not obligated to match someone else's stamina. You are responsible for your own regulation. And when you regulate intentionally, something changes. Social interaction stops feeling like a threat to your stability. It becomes something you can enter and exit consciously, without collapse, without resentment, without identity fragmentation. That is a shift from exhaustion to pacing, from confusion to clarity, from self-doubt to self-awareness. You are not antisocial. You are recalibrating how you engage. And recalibration is part of individuation. It is not dramatic. It is disciplined. You are learning how to stay present without draining yourself. And that is a skill, not a personality flaw. The exhaustion you feel after social interaction is not a personality flaw. It's not proof that you're antisocial. It's not evidence that you're withdrawing. It's not a sign that something is wrong with you. It's information. Your nervous system is telling you how much energy was spent, not just talking, not just listening, but regulating, monitoring, adjusting, holding. The real question is not, why am I like this? The real question is, where did my energy go? If it went toward authentic conversation, the fatigue will feel clean. You'll be tired, but steady. If it went towards subtle performance, over accommodation or misalignment, the fatigue will feel heavier, foggy, irritable, restless. That distinction matters. Because once you understand that exhaustion is often about persona management and nervous system activation, the shame disappears. You stop trying to fix your personality, and you start refining your engagement. Individuation does not make you antisocial. It makes you less willing to fragment yourself for connection. And fragmentation is expensive. As you mature, you become more selective, not in people, in energy distribution. You speak when aligned. You leave when depleted. You rest without guilt. That is not avoidance. That is regulation. And regulation is strength. You are not becoming distant from the world. You are learning how to enter it without losing yourself. And that shift, though subtle, changes everything. Because once you engage consciously, exhaustion becomes manageable, not mysterious, not shameful, just a signal. And when you treat it as a signal instead of flaw, you begin to respond with wisdom instead of self-doubt. You are not drained because you are weak. You are drained because energy was used. The work now is not to withdraw. It is to engage without overextending. Quietly, deliberately, in alignment. That is not antisocial. That is individuation in motion.